Thank you all for joining. For those of you who do not know me, my name is Sapna Shah. I'm the founder of Retail X Series. I'm an angel investor. I invest in the future of retail at the pre-seed stage. That's everything from B2B retail tech to digitally native brands and everything in between. Looking forward to this conversation today with Adrian Solgaard. Before we get started, I'll just let you know this call is being recorded. It will be posted on the Retail X Series YouTube channel in the next few days. So if you have to jump off early or want to look at it again, you'll be able to find it there. We will start with about 30 minutes of a moderated discussion and then move to your questions. So if you have questions as we're talking, please put them in the chat. Once again, please keep yourself muted so that we can eliminate background noise. And one last thing before we get started. In the next few days, if you haven't already, if you haven't already been part of these groups, you will get an invite to the Retail X Series Google group, as well as our Slack channel, so that you can continue the conversation with other people in the community. So with that, welcome, Adrian. Why don't you start with a little introduction of yourself and what Solgaard does? Adrian, you're on mute. Oops. There we go.
Yeah, okay, it wouldn't let me unmute myself.
Oh, that's sorry.
I'm Adrian Solgaard. I run a company called Solgaard. We make travel gear. We say gear for global citizens. The first product we made was a backpack that had a solar panel in it. It was kind of my mark of wanting to do something in the world of sustainability, but I didn't know what it was yet. About a year or two into the business, realized that we could be using ocean plastic to make the fabric for our bags, and then undertook about a 1.5 year long process of figuring out how to make that fabric work. And then we've enveloped that into everything that we do. So we're a sustainability-led brand that makes gear for your life on the go.
And you've also expanded beyond kind of the bag space recently as well.
Yeah, so we also do a line of watches, we do suitcases, and then we have some electronic products as well. The first backpack had a solar-powered Bluetooth speaker built into it. And we've got some news upcoming soon that we're releasing some updated versions of some of those kinds of tech products.
Perfect. Okay, great. So let's get started. I want to start thinking back to those earliest days when you were first launching the company with your first product, which was the original backpack. So I believe that you started with a Kickstarter campaign. Why did you choose Kickstarter as a route as opposed to maybe doing pre-orders on your website or just launching with a big, press shebang or whatever? What was kind of the thought process behind Kickstarter?
Yeah. So also for context, we've run 5 Kickstarter campaigns in total, generating $3.7 million in crowdfunding revenue, just for a little bit of extra context. I started out Kickstarter for Solgaard because I'd already run a Kickstarter campaign 3 years prior to that for a bicycle lock. And I understood, okay, well, there's this community of people that are passionate to fund new projects, new idea. And when you're at that pre-seed stage, you can either start like the investor hunt and go down the investor trail looking for VC dollars, which is actually quite tough because you have no market validation. Kickstarter allows you to get market validation and customers and revenue to work with right off the bat with no need for dilution and no need for like spending 6 months hunting down investors, and at the end of the day, you've got nothing left to show. Whereas if you run down and you chase down the Kickstarter path, at the end of that 6 months, you have a minimum viable product, you have data, and you have an idea of like what people think of it and how it's going to go. But you're able to fail faster or succeed faster by doing it. It's just a shortcut.
And so let's talk more about that kind of specific process. I mean, I hear a lot of founders who say, I kind of want to do a Kickstarter or an Indiegogo or any of these other, platforms, but it feels really expensive and difficult. So can you kind of walk through what your experience was? I mean, you clearly had a very successful Kickstarter to start off your company. How did you do that?
So it doesn't need to be expensive to start a Kickstarter campaign. The campaign for LifePack, this solar powered backpack, which it turns out you bought your husband last year, we just found out.
Totally coincidentally.
So we launched that in early 2016. I was like staring down the barrel of the gun of like, okay, my last business had just failed. What was I going to do? I had $600 in the bank, and that was my budget to work with to get the Kickstarter campaign up and running. My friend let me live on her couch, and I spent $200 on samples, $125 on a new shirt and jacket to wear in the video, And the rest, I shot the video myself. My designer friend helped design the whole campaign, accepting that he'd get paid at the end of the whole deal. He's still our designer to this day. Him and I have worked together for 7 years. He's incredible. So I was able to create a campaign that raised $613,000 with a $600 budget. So you don't need a big budget. You just need to make sure you're telling a good story and you have a product that's satiating a need that people have. So like one thing, when you're doing this like early stage market validation for a Kickstarter campaign or for any kind of product, if you start like telling your friends about it and sharing it with people, if people are like, oh, cool idea, and then they change the subject, it means you're probably not really onto something. But if they're like, oh, well, when can I get one? Then that's like, okay, there's your sign that like, you know, they're taking the bait. And that's what I really noticed with that backpack right off the bat was people, my friends and everyone, they were like, wait, can I actually get one of those? Wait, when can I get it? It's like, oh, okay, that means we got something. So
that's really interesting because I think, you know, sometimes, I mean, your friends are always going to tell you your product is great, but you're saying
say good idea. They're going to say good idea, but if they say, can I get one?
That's the difference.
That's where the flip is.
So when that happened, you know, as you came up with this idea and you said, okay, I'm going to put together this Kickstarter, you know, it's hard to get heard amongst the noise in a Kickstarter campaign, right? Because there's so many other Kickstarters at the same time. How did you, you know, did you leverage your friends? How else did you leverage like your network? How did you get kind of that visibility on a platform that has, I mean, I have no idea how many products on it at any given time.
A lot. There, so I do want to answer the other question I had right before, which is like a general budget. It can be, you could blow a ton of money launching a campaign. I would say if you're going to do a Kickstarter campaign, having 5 to 10 grand allocated for like producing a video, samples, prototypes, all that should probably be around about enough. You don't need to spend much more than that. But how do you get it? How do you get that early traction? How do you get your friends on board? I would say it's actually a little bit less about your friends and more about finding your way into the Kickstarter ecosystem. Making a product that works for the Kickstarter network of people because they'll want to share it then with their friends. Kickstarter is a very specific beast of an e-com marketplace. There's about 13 million users on the platform, which for in the US, I think there's 12 million or something, which works out to 0.25% of the population. So if you take 100 people and you try to sell them a Kickstarter campaign, only a quarter of one person is going to do it. But if you instead just go, okay, cut out everyone, only talk to the Kickstarter community, that's kind of the way you market a Kickstarter campaign efficiently and effectively. And so to do that, we were, initially we just operated within Kickstarter within other Kickstarter campaigns using other people to do cross-promotional updates where they would share the campaign idea with their community who had just backed their project, which is a really low-cost way because you do a share for share kind of thing. Say you have 100 backers on your campaign, they've got 120 or 90, you share 3 updates of other people's in the bottom of yours, they share 3 updates in the bottom of theirs. That's a really nice way to cross-pollinate.
You mentioned something that I'd like to get into a little bit deeper. You said there are certain kinds of products that work well on Kickstarter. Yeah. What do you mean by that?
Well, so like you've seen a bell curve of early adopters, middle, late laggards, whatever. So like on that curve, I'm not sure which way it's mirroring, but you know, the starting point is early adopters. Kickstarter is the stage even before that. It's people that are like pre-early adopters. They want to be the very first people to have their hands on something. Kind of like in the 90s when you'd say like, oh, I got the Radiohead album. On the first day it came out, you'd wait up in line at the record store or whatever to get it. We don't have that anymore, but in products, there kind of is that. And kind of like people used to line up for the newest iPhone, it's kind of in the tech product world on Kickstarter, there still is very much that mentality where people want to be a part of it. When you're launching a product on Kickstarter, the backers are being a part of the journey and they're able to like, sometimes the questions and insights that backers will give ends up into the final product. So for them, it's kind of like a small way of seed investing and like being a part of the project and helping it come to life because they're a part of its success. So it's making products that work for that super early adopter mentality.
So let's say you have a product that works for that early adopter mentality. And, you know, I love this idea of kind of partnering with others and, you know, cross-pollinating. But you also did have friends, clearly, and your own network as well. And did you galvanize them to back your campaign in the early days? One of the things I've heard from a lot of founders who've used Kickstarter effectively is they basically had their entire networks go on in day one commit to something on the campaign just to kind of create that momentum.
And if you have a network that's willing to do that, absolutely do it. And because that's a great way to get your first 50 or 100. It's, because there is only so many people in your network that you can say, hey, put money into this thing, because not everybody is able to do that or willing to do that. And so if you're wanting to, a Kickstarter campaign is really all about the first 3-4 days and the last 3-4 days. And if you can create that avalanche on day one, in hour one, and get onto the trending page of what's new, that's a really key driver of a Kickstarter campaign and of a successful Kickstarter campaign. That was extremely important a couple of years ago when it was a very organic platform. Now it is relying more on ads to drive traffic to it. So we work with ad agencies to run paid advertising, and these ad agencies have massive Rolodexes of Kickstarter backers where they build lookalike audiences, and not just lookalike audiences. They're able just to advertise at the audiences of other backers of these other campaigns. So they're working directly to that Kickstarter community.
That's really interesting, because I thought there was also, I think you got a lot of press during your first Kickstarter campaign.
It's so important.
How did you manage that?
The first campaign, I hired a virtual assistant for like $3 an hour on Upwork, and I said, here's this Kickstarter campaign that was a tech-focused thing. They had a bunch of press. Find the email address of these 25 press articles, find the email address of the person, and reach out to them and just like start spamming them, basically. And that kind of sort of worked then, 4 years ago. Now that way doesn't quite work as well. There's a lot of regulations on like a GQ, for example. I'm not going to post about a Kickstarter campaign because it's not a real product yet, and people, there have been too many frauds on Kickstarter, too many fraudulent campaigns that haven't come to life. So a lot of big press outlets won't cover it, but there are Kickstarter specific press outlets that will love to cover it. So it's more about focusing on those.
And do you think press was critical in kind of gaining the backers that you ultimately ended up with?
100%. It gives the validation and another perspective as well on the product.
Yeah, because you ultimately, I think, if I remember the number correctly, you had over 3,700 backers for the first
3,705. Yeah.
3,705.
You need to remember these numbers because they're important. Like 3,705 individuals who put their money in to make this product a reality.
I mean, that's
like,
kind of,
you need to think that you're, and this is the same for any kind of customer acquisition. It's not a number and a data set. It's a person. You're talking to a person on the other side of this computer screen that's sitting on their computer screen or on their phone. And you need to convince their mentality that, oh, this is a good idea for me to purchase this. What are the things that they need to see and learn about and care about? And it's about the people. That's the metric that really matters, is how do you convince the people to do the thing?
well, and sometimes convincing the people to do the thing is really about you, right? You as the founder, right? It's a lot of, I feel like a lot of this is founder story, and not just a great product. Obviously that's like table stakes, right? And you talked about how you bought a jacket and a shirt to do the video. Yeah. I mean, how much of that like personal element did you kind of put into that first video? Because I think, I feel like that, yeah, I feel like that's really important.
Yeah, no, it absolutely is. Because most of the inventions that I've made have been born out of frustration in some way or another. And that's what people resonate with. Like the first campaign was for a bike lock. And I had this picture of me crying on the ground by an empty bike rack. And that was what people resonated with. They're like, oh yeah, and like, that's what people resonate with. And then with the backpack, it's like seeing these instances of like, oh, well, I wanted to do this, or I need to, like, people love that personality effect of it. And so I think the more you can, rather than giving people advice or telling them, here's what you should do, you can just say, hey, here's what I'm doing. Here's how I use the thing. And then when people can listen to that and they can pick out of it where they see an alignment in their life, and that's a smoother way for people to digest information than to tell them what to think or tell them what to do.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then, as you're kind of going through that process with, people starting to back your campaign, you talked a little bit about ads, we've talked about press. Were there any other things that you really did? And we talked about the cross-pollination. Were there any other things that you did kind of off the platform or on the platform that were critical in kind of getting to that 3,705 backers?
Well, answering questions in the comments section, depending on how big your team is, if you're the one personally answering them or if someone else is answering them. Kickstarter has a public comment section, and they also have like a DM thing. And so keeping an eye and a handle on the DM, on the public comment section is super important, because if people come to your campaign and see that there's 1,000 unanswered questions, that means there's a problem. And if you, so like one number that I like to look at when I'm looking at a campaign that has a high number of, before I even try to go reading through their updates of what's happened, if I see there's 3,705 backers and that there's like 15,000 comments, that's a red flag, because that means that those people have been so annoyed that on average they've written 5 comments each. That's not a happy sign. People are happy, they're generally kind of quiet. People get mad. When people get mad, they get vocal. So, so keeping an eye on the public comment section, answering everything you can there, also providing frequent updates about what's going on. Kickstarter backers aren't customers, they're backers. They want to be part of the journey. So providing updates in the updates column with like, hey, here's where it's at, here's what's going on, here's what's happening. You can keep people and bring them along the journey.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. What did you ever, in those beginning days, I'm just going to pivot a little bit from Kickstarter for a second. Did you ever consider kind of selling your product on Amazon or other marketplaces in those early days? I know this is a big question for many founders who are on this call right now.
As soon as we had inventory, we went onto Amazon, and our Amazon sales were almost 1-to-1 from our website.
Oh, is that right?
Amazon is a huge opportunity for getting your product into the hands of people. It's not as lucrative as it is on your website. You lose some control, you lose some data, but if you're, depending on the price point of your product and a lot of other factors, it can be a really good way to get your product moving and at volume.
And what about, since you mentioned your own site as well, kind of post Kickstarter, what else were you doing to promote people coming to your site, which is obviously more lucrative than going to Amazon?
Press is always one of the big drivers for organic, and then ad spend, Facebook, Google, Instagram, Snapchat. Surprisingly, Snapchat works really well. We're just getting our TikTok ad started. I'm super excited about it. I love TikTok.
Did you use influencers at all in the early days?
We did. Influencers is a tricky one. Influencer marketing on Instagram worked a lot better before there was an algorithm on what the feed was. When it was sequential, everyone would see every post, but now you only get fed whatever you get fed. So influencer marketing has become pretty saturated, and it's not worth the money that a lot of them are charging. So that can be quite a challenge. That said, if you can find influencers that are a natural fit with their community, their messaging, that align with what your brand is, if your brand has some values or goals behind it, there can be really strong alignment there. But I don't think that should be your only pillar. It's a pillar of this textile, this myriad of opportunities and ways you need to reach your customers.
Yeah, you're not the only person who has said that. I think a lot of, particularly at the early stage, I think influencers can be really expensive for maybe very little return versus some of these other things like ads. One of the things we talk about in the RetailX community all the time is kind of building your customer list, right, and your email list. Obviously, all of these things that you've done have helped do that in these early days. But as you're continuing to kind of grow new products, you're launching a lot of your new products with additional Kickstarters, which I do also want to talk about. But what are some of the other ways that you have really been driving people to sign up for emails? Because I think there is a lot of email fatigue from kind of DTC companies right now.
So driving people to sign up for our email lists. Our email is again, it's one of the pretty strong pillars in our marketing mix. We drive people to sign up for our emails by like offering a discount code for signing up on it. But then we try to keep our emails limited to max twice a week, and we try to make them pretty informative, and our open rates show that people are opening quite a lot more than a lot of other rates I've heard of other people. And we try to keep the emails informative, educational, and then we kind of push the product as well. And we don't really we only really do a hard push on our email list if there's like product specific sale or something like that. By keeping it a little bit more like, hey, here's some benefits for what you do here. During Corona time, we've had virtual tours where we went like on a virtual road trip through Italy on like a live Zoom, and like that was stuff that people were loving to be a part of.
You know, you just touched on that. The virtual tour thing is really interesting because I think as a company who kind of was rooted in travel, it almost feels really easy to build community because people have so much in common, right? If they're buying these sort of travel backpacks and bags, they already have a certain lifestyle. Has that been something that has, you know, sort of driven the repeat purchasing?
Somewhat. I think what we're seeing a lot of is people who buy for themselves, then they'll buy another one as a gift or buy it for their spouse or partner or something like that. And then we're having people who will buy a suitcase last year, then they'll come back and buy a backpack from us next year. We're not, the suitcase on average lasts 7 years, the backpack lasts 3 years. So our repeat rate isn't like someone who's selling a face cream that they get someone who orders every 90 days or whatever it is. So we need to be cognizant of that. And that's also why we don't have too heavy of a push on our emails, because we know that we've got to, we have a higher AOV than a lot of other brands, but we have a less frequent purchase rate. So we need to kind of keep that in mind as we balance our
So let's go back to this fact that you've continued to use Kickstarter for additional product launches. Why do that? Like you've already gotten kind of an email list. You know what marketing mix works for you. Why continue to launch new products on Kickstarter?
So developing a product and getting a product within your hand takes, let's call it anywhere from 2 to 6 months as just a whatever. Then once you have that prototype in your hands, you need to pay for the tooling, and then you need to get the first production batch financed. And so you're talking about 2 months to launch a product or 10 months. So we can launch a product after 2 months, and we can have revenue capture to cover that first production cycle and everything. So we don't need to have money up front to get it started. So by using Kickstarter to fund additional product launches, we're able to get more ideas out into the world sooner. And that's kind of the thing.
Yeah.
That's what really it is for me. Like, I'm afraid that if I drop dead next year, that I'll have a list of 30 products that I never got to bring out. So like, if I can get the ideas out sooner, like, great, just like get them out, get them off my plate.
But, you know, it's really interesting too, because you're also, you know, it's an R&D, but you're also testing demand, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And you get to see it before you actually do all the work.
Yeah. If we had raised $20 million in venture capital and had a ton of money to throw at products, maybe we wouldn't use Kickstarter as much. But like, well, we don't. So this is the way that works for us to get the most innovative ideas in the world. And also, sometimes you miss something. And so when you put it out on Kickstarter, you'll hear people's feedback about this or that, and it's like, oh, right, you can make those small little tweaks, and that way people get a version 1.2 of the product instead of version 1. So it's, yeah, basically, it's a shortcut. That's why.
And a shortcut for when you don't have 20 million in VC, which is probably most of everybody that's on this call.
Most people, period.
So I have 2 more questions before we move to audience questions. So for those of you in the audience, put your questions in the chat, and we'll get to them shortly. So I always like to ask this question of all founders who've kind of developed multiple products, which is sort of, what's the one thing you've tried for customer acquisition, particularly in those early days, but even today, that just didn't work for your company at all?
Honestly, influencer marketing is probably the most disappointing one, where we've spent a substantial amount of money on like, okay, this organic Instagram thing, and expecting that to work. Whereas really it's paid advertising that works. You get the right images, and the right audience, and you can figure out your ROAS, and you can get that number dialed in and get it right. So yeah, that I think we worked with really bad PR agencies at one point. Now we have a rock star in-house PR person who she did a great job for us. I've probably done just about every single thing badly. So like, I don't know which one to pick, but like, if you have bad PR, if you have bad influencer marketing, if you have bad, like none of it will work. So I think you just need to figure out what works for your brand and what works to get your voice out. And the only way to figure that out is to kind of try it all.
Yeah, I think I hear that a lot actually, which is that, people keep trying different things and trying, and like you either get the right agency or you finally figure out what the right messaging is, or you find that right customer persona that you're going after. But I completely hear you on influencers as well, because that is definitely something that doesn't seem to work for everybody. Although it's funny because in the travel sector, you hear about influencer marketing working really well, actually.
So influencer marketing, so let's take Away, for example. They've built a really strong brand and done an amazing job. When you have that $20 million of funding, and if you can make that thunderclap effect with 40 influencers that all have a strong following, that's where you get it. You don't get, there's no silver bullet for any of this stuff, right? And so if you can get 40 influencers as like an army coming forward together, then it works. But if you don't have that, if you just have like, okay, let's get this one person to do it, and it's not Kylie Jenner, it's not gonna work. Like you need to,
yeah.
That's where I underestimated the way that influencer marketing works out. You can just like pay someone with 200,000 followers and you're going to get all this exposure out of it. But now you have someone with 200,000 followers on Instagram, share your post in their thing and say direct whatever. And it barely makes a drip compared to what you can do with efficient advertising spend targeted to the right audience. So.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay. And then my last question is, for the founders on this call, who are all pretty early stage DTC brands, most of them, what advice would you give them just about customer acquisition at these early stages in general?
Well, I think what's worked for us is having like a wide funnel going with PR in, and then using those PR mentions in your advertising as a way to like get people in. And then it's really on the retargeting that we close most of our customers. We get the prospecting to get them in, but we very rarely capture a sale on the first time someone comes to our website. So for us, it's very important on that retargeting thing. So I think just think about what that mix looks like and what that customer's journey is to find a way to get to your site and buy your thing, and figure out the different levels of communication being to you. Press validation, influencer validation, this, and then you can bring them in. So I think think about the steps that it takes for that customer journey.
Yeah, that's great advice, I think, and it's probably different for everyone. So appreciate you sharing all of this, actually. So we're going to move to the questions. And everyone can continue to put in your questions. I'm just going to go through them in order, and I'll just read them aloud, and Adrian will answer them, hopefully. So the first question is from Barbara Rejo. What was your calculus for the right amount to raise in your first campaign?
So basically do it as low as possible, because the lower it is, the lower that number is, the sooner you can reach your goal. And then you can but it needs to be the amount of what's it going to cost to open up the tooling to make that first production batch. So for our first campaign, the target was $20,000 and we raised $613,000. So like, great, smash that target. We probably, if we only raised $21,000, we probably would have struggled to make it happen. We could have done it, but like it would have been a real struggle. Around 80K was that mark where it would really start to get traction. People gain confidence in funding a campaign that's already achieved its goal. So by having that, it's a smarter way to get more traction. It's again, Kickstarter, you're creating an avalanche. And what do you need to do to get the avalanche started? Take that.
I love that, creating an avalanche. So would you, looking back though, if you had only raised 21K, you said you would have struggled. Do you think you should have made it like 30K your minimum? I
mean, I don't think it would make a difference on that campaign. The next campaign, we did a $100,000 target. That campaign raised $440,000. We now tend to go with lower campaign numbers, or the lower minimum number, just because it kind of, it removes a piece of stress for the customer as they're seeing, oh, this is funded. Because like now we're at the point that we're going to be able to make the campaign happen no matter what that number is. But by having that bar a little bit lower, it just makes it easier to get over that first jump. And then if you can say, hey, we were fully funded in the first day, people love to hear that story. So
right, got it. Okay, the next question is from Lauren. What qualifies as bad PR? Why didn't it work? You sort of allotted right over it, actually.
No, what I had said was it was a bad agency.
Ah.
It was an agency that we had in a retainer for 3 months, and in 3 months, they didn't get us a single piece of press. And then like 2 months later, one of the pieces that they had been working on eventually popped up in the Boston Globe. So yeah, that wasn't a comment about what was bad PR. That was about the PR agency that didn't get any PR.
So actually this happens I talk to a lot of founders about this. So I'd like to go in just slightly deeper on this one. A lot of PR agencies tell their clients it's going to take 3 to 6 months to see the results, and you have to pay me for 3 to 6 months until you see those results. So, that agency obviously didn't kind of get you the results after 3 months. I'm sure at that point they said, just wait.
We're running out of money. We didn't have to continue. Like if it had been faster, because that's the joys and the reality of being a bootstrap startup is you'll have cash cycles, and if you're tight on cash, you got to cut spending to make sure you make it through the other stuff. And that was just the timing of that. Maybe they could have worked out to be better in the long run, but like I love having PR in-house because it's agencies are a challenge to work with oftentimes. And expensive. Yeah. Because for agencies, best practice for and this is whether it's a design agency, anything, they typically will take whatever they're going to pay their employee per hour, they multiply that times 3. So let's say they're going to pay that person $50 an hour, just for easy math. You'll be paying the agency $150 an hour for someone who's going to get $50 an hour. So if you can just hire that person for $50 an hour, then if you can do a good job of finding them, you're better off and then you don't deal with all the stuff there. So
yeah. Great. The next question is from Mara. What agency did you use for Facebook ads? Would you recommend them? And how much did you spend initially?
So we're using Juice now for ads. They're based in New York. They're great. This is actually one agency that's been really good for us. Initially, so we've had these different cash cycles. I would say that typically for an ad agency that's going to be managing your spend, you're going to have a minimum commitment to the agency for their management fees, which is going to be, call it between $5,000 and $10,000 a month. So if you're going to be spending $5,000 a month in ads, you're better off doing it yourself if you know how to use the back end of Facebook, or finding a freelancer on a website like Upwork, something like that to manage. The number where I think it starts to make sense to work with an agency is when you're spending like 20 to 30K a month in ads. That's where there's actually enough data for an agency to work with, because to give an agency $5,000 a month in fees and $5,000 a month to spend, there's not enough data there. You're better off building that number so that they have a $20,000 pot to work with, and then you can start increasing that spend from there.
Very helpful, thank you. The next question is, can you start PR at the prototype stage, and what are your thoughts on a second Kickstarter after a failed first one?
I'll answer the second one first. So you come back to Kickstarter a second time, you say, hey, the first one failed, so I learned my lesson. I listened to what you guys said, and now we've made some improvements. There's a lot of cases, things that have worked really well for that. There's one campaign, I think it closed 2 or 3 days ago, that raised $1.2 million for a phone. It's kind of like a new version of a pop socket that had a magnetic wireless charging pad thing in it. Their first campaign, 2 months ago, failed. They rebooted it, restarted it with a few changes, and it raised $1.2 million. So it can totally happen as long as you listen to what the feedback is. PR with a prototype, unless it's something that's like world changing, it's not really news to be like, oh, someone made a prototype. Cool. Like no one really cares to hear about that, right? If it's like, oh, you can get it, it's transaction. A journalist wants to write about something that their customer can learn about and do with it. If it's just without knowing what the prototype is, it might not be the best bet to go to PR with the prototype stage. Also, if you have any patentable features on the prototype, you might not want to go to public relations route first, because it's better to get your patents in place before you bring it public.
Got it, thank you. Question from Kevin. Would you recommend affiliate marketing from the beginning?
Yes. Affiliate marketing is another piece of our tapestry that drives like 13 or 14% of our online sales on our website. So it's a really meaningful one. But again, it's not the silver bullet. None of these things are silver bullets. You need to do all of them to make that, like building soldiers and making a wall, pushing forward.
The next question is from Carlos. Are you going to send a link so I can watch again? Yes, Carlos. It's going to be on the RetailX YouTube channel. From Kevin. This is still about affiliate marketing. And do you need an agency, or can you do it on your own through platforms such as Share a Sale?
So we started out doing it on our own, and then now we're working with an agency. And so we're using Share a Sale, and then we have an agency rep guy. I think he's kind of a freelancer. I've actually never talked to him. Our marketing guy does it. And you can do it yourself on Share a Sale. You can put it on there, but that's just like if you put a product on Amazon or put a product on the store in a shelf in the store and nobody does anything about it, it's just sitting there. So the affiliate manager guy, he goes out and he's like, hey, affiliate person, I see you have a travel site. Would you like to make this product be a thing on your site? So he goes out and does the hunting for us, and then we can help like manage and make sure their language and voice and all that stuff's correct. So yeah, I would recommend affiliate marketing. We use Share a Sale. It's the clunkiest, weird back end, but it works. And we use an agency or a manager to help get it set up.
Great. This question is from Giovanna. Did you look into using any other crowdfunding platforms? Why did you choose Kickstarter?
So Kickstarter and Indiegogo are the two primary ones that I think you should look at. Both have their valid points and places. We've generated a lot of goodwill with the Kickstarter community, so that's kind of why we were there. Indiegogo, so Kickstarter is a little bit more opaque of an organization in terms of like trying to get into contact with someone there. It's very difficult. Even after we had raised over $1 million, I still couldn't get the phone number of someone to talk to find out like, hey, what about this thing? Whereas Indiegogo are very active and like, hey, how can we help you? What can we do? Hey, you might want to try this, and they'll help you manage your campaign and like optimize it for the site. So Indiegogo is much more helpful, much more friendly on that side.
But yet you still chose Kickstarter.
We still chose Kickstarter because we have a community. So and so what we do, we launch on Kickstarter, and then right the day the Kickstarter campaign finishes, Indiegogo has a function called Indiegogo In Demand, which is like pre-sales that is like with a flexible end date. So let's say we're selling a product that's a $200 retail price on Kickstarter. We're going to be selling it for $159 for 30 days. Then when that campaign closes, boom, then we go on to Indiegogo In Demand for the next 30 or 60 or 90 days while the product is being produced, and we'll sell it there for $10 more, so for like $169. And then you can still continue to pre-order the product there. And then once we have it in stock, we close that down, and then we just sell it from our website. We do pay fees to Indiegogo to have that, but it's just a little bit more transparent than when someone's like, oh, I'm buying it from Indiegogo, I'm going to have to wait a little while. Whereas when you buy it from a website, and if you have to wait 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 5 weeks, no one really accepts that. So it's better from a communication standpoint, and people understand that they're going to have to wait a little bit longer from that.
So even now, when you're launching new products, if you did them as pre-orders on your site, you feel like customers would not want to wait 6 months?
People, if they're on a website and they press buy now or order now or pre-order now, like we've done it before, and people's patience tolerance is just, it's a little bit, it's just not, people aren't quite as patient when they're ordering directly from a website.
That's really interesting. I had not thought of
in our experience, yeah.
Yeah, huh.
And I think that's when it comes to the point of like, you have some of your products in stock that ship within 24 hours, and some, it's just that communication. Sometimes people won't read the fine print, or like the block thing, because they're just like, oh, blue button, I buy now. Like,
right. That makes sense. Okay, the next question is from Gia Collection. How do you do your PR work at the moment? Do you still work with a virtual assistant on Upwork to get the work done, or do you do it yourself? What do you think is the most effective way to get press coverage?
No, we have someone in-house who does it, and she does a great job. Her name's Emma. She's probably listening in on this call. And Yeah, no, and she does it. So she'll build a list of people that she's going to go out to, and then she'll communicate to them and go from there. And she does all sorts of other weird dark magic that I don't know about. But I think the most effective way to get press depends on what the size of your team is. If you're a one-person team that's like going to be doing it yourself, you can try going that route. It just can take up a lot of your time. If that might be the most effective use of your time, I don't know. But yeah. That virtual assistant route can kind of work for a little while, but like they might not know the intricacies of like overly spamming these people. And like, I think the best thing I've ever heard as it relates to PR is stop asking people to pay attention to your brand and start doing something worth paying attention to.
Right.
And I think that if you kind of look at it that way and make it, think about the person who's going to read that blog. What makes it interesting for the person reading that person's blog? How can you elevate that journalist's perspective? Like, give them something that they want to work with.
I mean, you've talked a lot about press actually. And so just as a little follow-up to that, I mean, was that one of the key, when you thought about your marketing team and hiring people and bringing people in-house, was that one of your first marketing hires?
Well, we had an agency. No, because I'm thinking because the Emma, our PR gal that we have in house, she's been with us for like a year and a half. But before that, we were working with an agency. So like we had an agency helping us on our Kickstarter campaign who was also doing press. So I can't say that it was a first hire because we were working with an agency at first, but it is one of the primary things because we get a lot of value out of the press that we do. So.
Yeah. Okay. Next question. On the same topic, any type of content, blogs, virtual events, podcasts, etc., that are more effective than others in eliciting press?
Eliciting, that means getting press, right?
Yeah.
I'm not sure in terms of eliciting press, but like the content that works for our products, YouTube works super well. We have one of our affiliates is a YouTuber who does. He's done a few like reviews of the suitcase and like shows how it works, and that's worked super well for us there. But as far as eliciting press, I don't know which medium is the right one because I think a lot of it comes down to the relationship that our PR person has with that journalist, and then it's like it's the direct reach out because that's kind of where the press comes from. Because the journalist wants to be the first to write about something. They're not going to write about something that 30 other people have already written about. They want to be the first. So typically eliciting press comes from an email or a DM, and then it goes from there. And then YouTube and everything else gets made out of it. So I think.
Yeah. Well, what about like things like gift guides? I mean, we were just talking before we let everyone into the room that I actually found the backpack on a gift guide because I was like looking for a backpack for my husband for Christmas. Would you say like that has been critical? I mean, certainly it worked for one customer at least.
Yeah, no, they certainly do. They really do. And we were able to use, you might have found it on like CNET's best 10 laptop bags of 2019 or something.
Sure.
Because I know that one, we had that little banner on our website for a while. Getting on those guides is a great start, but then what you do with that information is really important. So like you can we got Time Magazine Best Inventions of 2018, woo! And so like we can then use that little banner on our website and say, hey, we won this thing. So whatever press you do get, make sure that you further amplify it to the people that come to your site. Because yes, press can help get people into your funnel, but that's only some of the people coming in. So you can then echo that back to the people that come from other places, and people like to hear about that.
Yeah. You do a great job. I was like on your site earlier today. It's very noticeable, all the press you've gotten. It's right there, up front and center. All right, the next question is, have you raised all your money through crowdfunding, or do you have, there we go.
There's the most recent one, I like this one.
Have you raised all your money through crowdfunding, or do you have investors now, and was that always your strategy?
We have investors now, yeah. We didn't at first. I initially wanted to build the business like without any outside investors because I had a bad experience with an investor in the previous one. But running a physical products company is a capital intensive undertaking, and we need to buy inventory 3 months in advance before we can market it. And it's just like to get those to balance out the highs and lows of those cash flow cycles, we needed to bring our water line up. So yeah, we brought investors on.
At what point was that in terms of the stage of your company?
That was a year and a half in. Wait, 2018, almost 2 years in.
Yeah.
So we're 4.5 years in now.
Got it. Lauren asks, have you used webinars as a marketing strategy?
We haven't, but we've thought about it. We did the virtual tour thing, which is a little bit of a webinar thing. But we've talked about doing some like thought leadership style like conversations like this, but we haven't done much of it, but I think it would be good to do.
Yeah. Especially in your category.
Yeah.
Next question from David. Did you use paid social to build sales on Kickstarter? Did you try a specialist Kickstarter agency? Do you use premiums on Kickstarter to induce sales?
Yes, we've used agencies to build our sales on Kickstarter. There's two that I recommend. One is called Inventive Partners. They're down in South Carolina. They're able to help you full service, whatever you might need with, whether it's PR, advertising, marketing, anything. If you need just advertising support, there's a company called Jellop that's based in Israel, JELLOP. They are fantastic, and we'll probably continue to use them for many years to come on Kickstarter campaigns. And I don't know what the question about do you use premiums on Kickstarter to induce sales means.
I don't know what that means. David, if you could actually clarify that a little bit more.
Gifts.
Oh, gifts.
Well, like so on Kickstarter, people don't just give us money, they're pre-purchasing a product. So they're buying a product at a discount. So it's like, hey, you buy this backpack and it's going to be retail at $250, but we're going to sell it to you for $175 or whatever that number is. So it's not a gift, it's like a pre-sale.
Great. We have time for a few more questions if anybody wants to put them in the chat. In the meantime, Adrian, can I ask you to put in the chat the name of those two Kickstarter agencies so people have the spelling correctly? Because I think those will be both good resources for this community.
Yeah, I'll just make sure I get the spelling correct. Mentis. I
just wrote it down with like random letters, so it's not clear to me. Kickstarters.com.
Go.
Great, thank you. Okay, and another question. Is your affiliate marketing person a freelancer? How can you find somebody with a skill set like that?
I think he's a freelancer. Marcus, who manages our e-com and our website, I guess this person had reached out to him through LinkedIn or something like that. That's how we found this person. I'm sure there's always a chance to try to find somebody on Upwork to do all kinds of different work. So I'd always suggest that as well, to look for any type of freelancer.
I think this is actually a really interesting question because I think a lot of early stage startups are looking for very specific skill sets, whether it's press or affiliate or, social ads, anything like that. And I think these are, so much of this comes from LinkedIn. And I will say to everybody who's on the call, what I've been hearing is there are a lot of people who've gotten furloughed who are great people right now that you can find on LinkedIn. So if you're looking for somebody, start there.
Yeah.
Question from Tobias. What percentage of your sales come from brick and mortar versus D2C?
D2C through our website is around 60% of our sales. Then around 20% goes to wholesale or to other retailers. And then around 20% is business to business, where like Shopify will buy backpacks and put their logo on it, or Deloitte or whatever. These kinds of companies.
Are you thinking about opening your own stores one day when we can all go to stores again?
It's been an ongoing thought and an ongoing conversation. Yeah, I don't think that right now is the right time to do it, but yeah, it's something that I'd love to do. I believe building a brand is like building a religion or building a cult, and every religion needs a temple to go worship in. So if you can have a flagship store that people can come and like see and feel and be a part of what your brand is all about, just having that, even having a digital version of that physical presence on your website can allow people to be like, oh, right, so if I was in a store, this is what it would look like, and this is how it would feel. And I think that there's something really like intrinsic that just makes it easier for us to understand a brand by seeing it in that kind of context.
I've seen a lot of brands start to partner to do things like that too, with like adjacent categories too, so that you're not taking the whole thing on yourself. But who knows what's going to happen post-COVID?
Yeah. I think there's going to be a lot of opportunities in retail in the next year, 2 years, and there's going to be some like flexible. We've actually had an offer for a flexible lease space where we'll pay a percentage of revenue for the rent, rather than signing a 2-year lease at a fixed lease rate. It's like we'll pay X% of our sales from that store, and any attributable online sales, a percentage of that to the landlord as that rental fee. Because like it's better for them to have people in their spaces than have them fully empty. So it's like,
yeah,
there's
that's
ways.
interesting. Yeah. Next question is from Patty. Is sustainable packaging something that you're using, and what are you using for shipping product?
Yes, so we don't have any single-use plastic in our shipping process at all. So we ship our bags in a tote bag, and then we've ended up still having to ship them in a cardboard box. We tried shipping them in just the tote bag, but they were getting a bit like crushed and crumpled in shipping, so that didn't work. Fortunately, cardboard can be recycled very efficiently, so that's okay. But yeah, so we've made our own reversible tote bags for that, and then yeah.
Great. How do you know when to move from Facebook and Instagram ads to Snapchat, TikTok, etc.?
You do them all.
Full court press.
Yeah, you try them all, and then you see what works. And you'll be creating different creative for each platform as well, because when I open TikTok, I'm looking for like bubbly, fun, friendly. When I'm on Instagram, I'm kind of looking for like gorgeous sunsets. And when you're on Facebook, like you're kind of looking for slightly different content. So you specify the creative for each platform, but you don't know that until you try it. Like maybe I'm wrong. You throw up 10 different ads on each platform. You put $10 behind each one of them, and you see which one goes the most efficiently, and then you pull down on that.
Great, thank you. And how did you form relationships with major distributors as you built to scale?
That's another reason why Kickstarter is great. You get a lot of inbound requests from distributors, smaller distributors that are up and coming in different countries. We've had more success with the smaller distributors that we're gonna represent a bigger piece of their pie, rather than the larger ones. And so it's just the process of getting them a sample, making sure they're happy with the sample. They'll place a first sample order of 50 or 100 units. Being really bullish or being really like rigid on, hey, we have a minimum order quantity of 400 units, that's it, that's all, typically doesn't work that well. You've got to be a little bit more flexible to get them started. And also, if a distributor is buying a product that's a bit new or a bit in a different category than what they're used to dealing with, it might take them a little while to sell through that inventory. And if they have too much inventory, they'll start bleeding it off and selling it for really cheap on Amazon. That leaves you in a bad position. So by having smaller relationships or smaller orders to start, it actually can protect you in the long run, in case it doesn't work out, because it doesn't work out with everyone.
Right. Which sort of brings me, what you just said struck me, which is like, did you find some of your investors? Did you get inbound from investors because of your Kickstarter?
I have none that we've actually seen, but I've had, they've come out of the woodwork from that for sure.
Yeah, because it's also obviously investors that you're then pitching also see that traction, but I was interested to know if anybody really.
I had, so the bike log business that I had an investor come on board. If you're talking to someone about a product and you're like, hey, I've got this idea, I think it's going to do well. You put it on Kickstarter, you put it out into the world, and it starts to take off. They'll see that as like, if they already like the product, they're like, yeah, but I'm just not sure how the market's going to react. If they start to see that traction, that really puts you in a strong position. So that's another reason why Kickstarter there's so many reasons to use it. Deliver the product to people and make sure that you're going to do your thing.
Do you do ads for Kickstarter? Because you're very passionate about Kickstarter.
No, I don't. No, but Kickstarter's changed my life. Like before this, I was working in television in Vancouver, Canada. And then I ran a Kickstarter campaign that allowed me to move to Europe. And I lived in 6 different countries throughout Europe. Now I live in New York and I have like a cool office and a team, and it's all built off of what Kickstarter got me started on. So it's just, yeah, it's the Kickstarter community has given me the opportunity to pursue my dream. So of course I'm excited about it.
I love it. I love it. So that is all the time we have. So first, let me just say, Adrian, thank you so much for taking the time today. This is really helpful, very insightful. Thank you to all the attendees. Just a quick reminder that next week on Thursday at 1 o'clock, same time, we'll be doing how to raise a pre-seed round featuring Kobe Wu of Visual. So don't miss that one. Find it on Eventbrite or on the RetailX website. And I hope to see you all next week. Thanks again, Adrian.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye-bye, all.